What's up, everyone? This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read some books this week.
I watched a movie this week. We're starting a two-parter series. We are covering the master, Spielberg. As adapteur, we are covering the man, Steven Spielberg. I watched a wonderful documentary on HBO called Spielberg by Susan Lacey.
And I had done some research, and I've read Jaws in the past. I've read Catch Me If You Can.
Yes, we're both huge we're both mutually Catch Me If You Can fans. We saw the stage production of Catch Me If You Can in Charleston, South Carolina, a few years ago.
But yeah, so we're gonna just jump right into everything he's done, how in the world he's been able to do all of this, and maybe what all this stuff is based on, because it's not original.
You know, he's not just some idea man who, like he didn't originate all of these things. It's actually a surprising amount of this is adaptation and playing with ideas and what his lens really is made up and what that does to the material that he attacks.
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting point of view.
And the thing that he pioneered in terms of the point of view, what's called the new Hollywood era, the mid 1960s to the early 1980s. And I guess the big premise behind this was that the director, rather than the studio system, was taking the key role. It wasn't like, oh, that's an MGM production. Yes. It's like, no, that's a Martin Scorsese film.
Yeah,
and so that
the 70s were a rambling time for cinema, and you had auteurs really just going off a new wave of going off and making films in ways that had never been done before.
Right,
and it ushered in a completely new era, like you're saying. Remind you, Jaws is 75. This is a wild period that Spielberg and his buddies are on the forefront of, and it changed the front of the art form. Really, story, period.
Because one of the main things that he changed, he was the creator of the first summer blockbuster, like you said, Jaws. There was never such a thing like that before him. And then when you're talking about riding the wave, he created these big escapist films and then also dabbled in films of very serious human issues. So he's done it all.
Just as an example off of that is Jurassic Park and Schindler's List are done in the same year. His 1993 is bananas. I mean, can you imagine the jump in that material?
Working on both, almost some of it is at the same time.
Simultaneously.
We'll get to all that, yeah.
Of course, so that's it.
Also, highest grossing film director in history. He's made the most money. His net worth is between 3 and 7 billion. We don't know because he gets so many random residuals from things, and it'd be impossible to parse it together. But as of now, I believe 34 films. So let's just jump in. What is he all about? Born in Ohio, December 18th, 1946. So his 74th birthday is coming up.
He's getting up there. Gosh.
Yeah. It's from an Orthodox Jewish family. They moved to New Jersey and then to Arizona. He was in a Hebrew school for a bit. He said he was embarrassed as a 7, 8, 9-year-old by the perception of his parents' practices and was bullied in high school for it, which then comes around later with Schindler's List, we'll get to, where he's re-accepting his Jewish heritage and coming to understand it.
Right.
But the film stuff came around age 12. The apocryphal story, the first home movie, was a train wreck with Lionel train sets. And then he was in the Boy Scouts. That's a big part of his life. But he got his photography merit badge, and his dad's still camera was broken. So he asked the scout leader if he could use a movie camera and made a little 9-minute Western film, and then got the merit badge for photography. But the way this camera came about was because his mom actually got it as a present for his dad on a camping trip. And Steven was like, can I be the family photographer? And then the very next year at age 13, he made a 40-minute war film with his high school friends and won a prize for it.
There's footage of him making this, and there's I've seen behind the scenes of him actually putting this together. It's kind of it's wildly inspiring. I mean, and it looks just like what me and my friends were doing. What kids across America are still doing every day. I mean, it's beautiful to see it. And like, oh my God, that kid actually did grow up to do, like, you can just see it all come together around him. It's really amazing.
It's like he had it from the beginning, from, like I said, from age 12. And then into high school, he makes 15 more amateur films, although they're much more than what most kids would do as an amateur. So at age 16, he made this 2-hour and 20-minute sci-fi film called Firelight.
Oh my gosh.
Made for $500. which he borrowed from his dad. It actually screened at a local Phoenix cinema, and he earned the budget back plus $1. So he made
Yes.
$1 off
In the
of
black,
it.
baby.
Because I think he said 500 people came, and maybe somebody accidentally gave him $2 instead
I mean,
of
what
$1.
a success.
Yeah.
It paid for itself.
Well, that's
You know?
also, it's like, that's what most kids don't get that at all, is like, oh, it is a business
Oh,
and you
yeah.
want to
Oh,
sell.
yeah.
So I read this great interview with his mom where she was saying she put the letters up on the marquee and was thinking, oh, this is a nice hobby, but he would, I think the thing that people don't realize is that he gets everybody involved. So like he did music on the clarinet for this sci-fi film that he made. His mom,
Mhm.
who was a concert pianist, transposed it into sheet music, and then the high school band performed it, and the drama class
Yes.
acted in it. So it's like
Yes.
that's what he does.
I
And I
love
guess
that.
if you could kind of speak to, because he wants to be this director, but it's like I think a lot of people don't even really know the film jobs. What, from your perspective, Evan, does a director do?
Well, really, the director is the one who decides what image makes you feel the precise emotional takeaway. So is this a scary image? Is that what I need at this precise moment? If I put it up to this image, what does that say? The director is really the one who has to have the vision of what the film is through line is going to be about emotionally. What does it say? If I cut to her eyes as she flickers, as he says something, what is that saying about what we know between the two of them? This is a person that's got to be incredibly intimate with human beings. I mean, this is an emotional job. This is trying to put the untangible, the things you can't put words to, into visuals. It's what makes you feel alive. And so it's a director is somebody chasing that feeling.
And they, I guess, trying to understand the technical side of things, then they would employ everybody else that has these. I mean, they still have artistic input, but like the technical skills of the camera and the lighting and the editing.
Exactly. So
To fulfill
this is
that.
somebody who's then, okay, they've got the vision and they've got the emotional point that they've got to get to, but he's also going to have the wherewithal to understand what that takes to get there. How many hands are in the pot of just the one image that we're going after right now?
Right.
How many people are involved? How many departments? This is somebody who's got to be able to communicate person to person. You've got to communicate an emotional takeaway. This is not a short barking orders. It's on the list. This is not one of those types of jobs.
Right.
So this is somebody who's really got to attack material from all perspectives. It's really got to be a bit of a cheerleader.
Oh, that's
and
beautiful.
understands what they're asking of people and why they're asking it.
Yeah, so it seems like he's got all of it from the beginning, even in high school. He's got that leadership sensibility. I looked into, like I said, with this interview with his mom, because a lot of the stuff we see with these early artists in their life, they have either parents that are really encouraging or just conducive, like with Dr. Seuss, where he was basically living in a zoo, and
Yeah.
and his parents were giving him
Right.
the wherewithal to do it. So his parents didn't, like I said, she said, oh, it's a nice hobby. So they let him do this stuff.
Right.
So it's like his mom, this is a direct quote from her, quote, "When he was growing up, I didn't know he was a genius. Frankly, I didn't know what the hell he was. I'm really ashamed, but I didn't recognize the symptoms of talent. I did him an injustice. I had no idea back then that my son would be Steven Spielberg."
Oh my gosh.
So, and just, he did a lot of.
This is what I'm interested in with him. The more and more I watch these movies, the more that I'm zeroed in on his view of the relationship between parent and child.
Yeah.
He's got a question about what does the relationship between parent and child really mean?
And like I said, his parents,
what do you do with it?
Yeah, they like she said once, she remembered, I took Steven to the Grand Canyon. He said, "This is nice." And then he threw up. With Steven, you held on for dear life. Like it wasn't even maybe necessarily film, but it's like clearly he's doing all that. And he made 15 films as a high schooler, but he's just doing a lot of stuff. It probably was a whirlwind, and he has siblings as well to just get him out the door and get him on with life. So for example, like his dad gave him a copy of The Scarlet Letter because Steven Spielberg hates reading or hated it as a kid. So he drew a flip book of a bowler knocking down bowling pins in the corner. And Steven said in an interview that was his first film adapted from another medium, the flip book, which nobody else will tell you, but we'll tell you that. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, you heard it here on a list.
Like you said, in terms of the complications with his family. So he moved to Saratoga, California for senior year because his parents divorced. So he stayed with his father thereafter in LA and wanted to become a film director. And that's where the dissonance comes from, where his parents were holding it together, I guess, like they say, for the kids, and then
and
broke
he's
apart
17,
and just
right?
missed that, and just missed that connection in that formative. I mean, they still loved him and they cared for him and all the stuff, but it just, that definitely affected him, as we see a lot of things
And this,
in
you know, and
childhood affect
I'm just
people.
thinking about, I'm thinking about what maybe his loneliness would have felt like. I mean, right there from his mom, we didn't know he was going to be who he was. Even, he's 17. He's still not, he's still their little Steven or whatever. I'm thinking about, now they've got their own problems. I mean, everybody does. But they still don't know who he is. And I find that just wild. When you get down to it, I mean, this is somebody who's deeply, deeply empathetic and really found what he was built to do in
So
so many ways. Yeah.
because of that, he applies to UCLA in Los Angeles. He didn't even apply to USC because it's a private school and it's too expensive.
Yeah.
So he knew he couldn't do it, and then was turned down at UCLA because of his grade average. He had a C. So he had to go to California State University in Long Beach, and they didn't have a film program, so he went for English. So it seems like, oh, well, that's the end of Steven Spielberg, like,
Right.
there it is. But he
became an accountant.
Right.
And his family was proud.
Not so fast. He gets into the film world by being an unpaid intern at Universal Studios in the editing department. And he's still not giving up making these short films. So he's made this 26-minute film called Amblin that he got financing from a friend who was an aspiring producer and gave him $10,000 to make it. This guy has never produced anything or hired actors or anything.
Yeah.
The main actor was a librarian at the Beverly Hills Public Library.
Solid choice.
Right. Well, it was a silent film. Nobody speaks. So, I mean, he probably saw this quiet guy and said, sounds good. But one of the...
I'm a main character in a Steven Spielberg movie.
The first one, yeah. But this is regarded as his first thing. He went to film festivals, it got shown to people.
Yeah.
There was a studio VP, Sidney Sheinberg, who was impressed by it and offered him a 7-year directing contract for television, which was the youngest person ever signed for a long-term deal with the studio, just based on this work.
Just for some kid who's like sneaking onto the lot, working in some other department.
Being an unpaid intern. Yeah.
And get out of here.
Watch my film. So, and you could tell even from the other stuff, it's like he definitely pushed himself into that position. It wasn't like, oh, just luck and he got a 7-year contract. No. So he drops out of college to direct TV. He didn't finish
choice
at Long Beach. So now we'll kind of go through the decades. This is the 70s. We'll skip back a little bit. 1969. It was the first thing he did in Hollywood was a segment of a pilot for this show called Night Gallery, which was a horror anthology. So he's just doing one of those little pieces of the anthology. The actress in it, though, is Joan Crawford, who is this massive classic star. She's older at the time, but she has already done, she was from the beginning of Hollywood. She has done thus far 31 silent pictures and 59 sound features.
That's bananas. He's what?
She's absolutely 17. Horrified. Well, she's like, I cannot be with this 21-year-old first-time director doing this. So she gave him a chance and just recognized. She was like, I was worried because he's not experienced, but she said experience does not always equal intuitive inspiration. And she wrote him a note at the time recognizing his talent and being like, it doesn't matter. There's these guys that say they have quote unquote experience, but they're horrible. And here's somebody who really has it. And they ended up being close friends until she died in 77. So 8 years later. But just crazy that he befriended this lady who is 50 plus years his senior and has seen it all from the beginning.
I love her reaction. I can't be in here. And then she listens to herself and then okay, let me see what this is about. And then gives him the time of day and reassesses and my God, look at this. He can do it. Wow, this is great. And God, she shepherds in the
gives him
king of
mentorship.
cinema, and she, she doesn't even know by the time she's gone. Like he's on his way, but wow, oh my God.
Yeah, crazy.
That is beautiful. I mean, sometimes, I just want to acknowledge her arc there of just like, I can't do this with, who is she? Well, all right. That's beautiful. I love it.
It is beautiful. So because of that, he ends up getting a few more TV episodes, does some feature length television pieces, and then was signed by Universal again to do 4 TV films. And such begins the adaptation game. So here we are.
Go.
His first one was a film called Duel, which is now a cult classic. Based
I love
on
this film. It's the predecessor for Jaws. If you haven't seen it, it's so fun. It is a man running in his little white car from this horrible truck, this tractor trailer running him down. And it's just a fate. There's no driver. It's just a horn that just chases you. And it is totally, it's him working out the visual language of what will become Jaws in just a couple years. I love the movie. It's such a little popcorn movie. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, for a made-for-TV film. It was based on a short story by Richard Matheson, who's the same guy who wrote I Am Legend.
Oh no, I had no idea. That's amazing. That's amazing.
So that's what it's based on.
Yes.
And then the next TV film he does is called Something Evil. And it's about this kid who's possessed by a demon. It was so not quite an adaptation, but The Exorcist was a very popular book and hadn't yet been made into the film, but they didn't have the rights for it. So they made this other film that's very similar because they're like, oh, exorcisms are popular because of the book.
This is his knockoff. Awesome.
Right. Yeah. And then did some other things, a pilot of a show that was never picked up on. But his first actual, now not TV film, his film, is called The Sugarland Express.
Yes.
And adaptation based on a real life incident he saw from a newspaper. It's about a husband and wife trying to outrun the law. Did poorly at the box office, but again, you're talking about he's getting a sense for what is Steven Spielberg, how does he do things on film sets. But this is where he met this guy named John Williams, who becomes one of the most amazing composers of all music, of all films, of all time. He worked with him on this. John Williams had done a few things before, but this is his first time with Steven. And then thereafter,
it's magic.
It's magic because in 1975, Jaws.
We're on, baby.
And this is based on a novel by Peter Benchley, yet another adaptation. And they are giving it, the producers, to this 26-year-old college dropout who has made a couple things.
And you know how it goes for him. Months and months over schedule, millions of dollars over budget, lost confidence from the crew,
almost shut down multiple times.
Yeah. I mean, it is one. I mean, if you don't know, it is the classic Hollywood failure story. Except it's a Cinderella story because they brought it home, turned it around, and it won a bunch of Oscars. So
and defined the summer blockbuster.
Yes, like started literally like a new phenomena in the medium.
It set the record for box office gross, the highest of all time, made him a household name, and then gave him the autonomy to do what he wanted. But he described it, like you said, it was his professional crucible. It was the do or die.
The day they stop production, the producers think, my God, finally it's over. Maybe, maybe people will forget about this and it will just go away. Like, okay, he's gone. It's over. And we're not bleeding money anymore. Steven takes it away at a little pool shop there's an editor, and they edit the movie and they bring it back. And they had what they had. But until that time, my God, there was no way they were ever going to make their money back. There was no way they were going to ever get any other projects done. Steven was never going to work in Hollywood again. If the movie had not worked, there would be no Steven Spielberg as we know him.
But he shot into the stratosphere, and it allowed him to do whatever he wanted. So everybody wants him now, but he actually...
Look at the magnitude, the weight of the shift of that. Either you're going home
Yeah.
This mess up is so big, it's irrevocable. You've ruined other careers
It's,
other than your own.
Richard Stanley, who did that. We talked about the H.P. Lovecraft episode where he just disappeared for 30 years or whatever because
This
he
was
failed.
it.
Yeah.
This was really it. This was really it. That's the magnitude of this. Because there's no in between. There just isn't.
Mm-hmm.
It either is a failure or my God, it turns into what it turned into. What a Cinderella story.
But in an interesting turn of events, because he has the leverage, he rejects a lot of propositions. It's all about the leverage. He rejects. They're like, we want Jaws 2, and he's like, I don't want to do that. And then they're like, well, what about King Kong? We're doing another King Kong. He's like, nah. And then they're like, well, what about Superman? And he's like, no way. So all of those things could have been Steven Spielberg things that they had offered him, and he was like, I don't want to do any of those.
I totally get why he doesn't want Jaws 2. Any other reasoning just because they're big properties? I'm just curious as to what the immediate, like, well, obviously not.
I mean, I think it was because they were big properties and he had just been through this personal hellscape of big properties. So the next thing he does, he works with Richard Dreyfuss again, who was in Jaws, on this thing that he really wanted to do, that he had an idea that he spent $500 on, and it becomes Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Which is a movie about a man losing his touch with reality and his family because he's working on something.
But it is almost exactly that film Firelight that he made in high school.
Really?
Yes.
No way.
Yes, there are certain things that are shot-for-shot elements of Firelight.
Oh my God.
And he said, I want to do it the way that I want to do it. So this comes out in 1977. It is both written and directed by him. So this is one of the rare ones that's an original, but it's almost not an original because it's an adaptation of something he already did as a kid.
He got himself. Look, he adapted himself.
Yeah. But he had lots of help on the rewrites. And this is one of the things where it's like, oh, he wrote it, but he's not a writer. He's a director. Yeah. And so this is one of them. Does amazingly well again, but it's a smaller, more intimate, not as crazy. It's still, I guess, considered a summer blockbuster, but it has a certain spirituality.
Yeah, so we're in that sophomore slump. It's but we're in that sophomore slump era here where he's, it's a good movie, but it's no Jaws. And what does that mean next? Nobody's sure. This is weird, but it's good. But that's no guarantee.
Yeah. So the next film, most people don't know about it. It is one of the biggest lessons of his career, he said, because it was a flop. And so the film is called 1941. Steven Spielberg loves war films. This is a war action comedy film. His friend Stanley Kubrick said it probably should have been marketed as a drama. It did profit worldwide, but did horrible in North America. So it was considered a box office bomb. And he had joked about converting it to a musical halfway into production. It just was not his forte. He was lambasting the other works that he had done in terms of Jaws and Duel with it. Interesting, we had mentioned in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, we were talking about Robert Zemeckis and how he didn't get that project right away because he had a couple of bombs or things that's like, oh, this should do well, but it didn't. So this is one that he wrote. That was one of those things. And he encountered Spielberg because Zemeckis was just a student at USC who barged into his office and gave him the script and everything. And so Spielberg, like I said, he said the personal arrogance got in the way after his success. He did not cede control of the miniature sequences and the action sequences to second units and model directors. He was then saying, oh, I'm going to fix that the next time. And so sequel mania comes into play. And so they want him to do a sequel to Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
What?
And
I
so,
didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that just sounds bad.
But he was like, I don't want to do it. But he's like, I also don't want Columbia Pictures to make a sequel without me like Jaws, because Lord knows Jaws 2. I haven't seen it, but I hear it's like, the sequels progressively.
Yeah.
slump.
It's definitely Far Cry. I have a soft spot for him, a Jaws fan, but it's definitely Far Cry from the first one.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun. It's fun.
So in order to avoid this whole Close Encounters 2 nightmare, he makes his own horror treatment but it's something different. And it's called Night Skies. And it's about aliens coming down and they're trying to communicate with livestock and then attack this human family. It's based on another adaptation, the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter in Kentucky, this story where these people claim to be attacked by these gremlin-like aliens. So he's got this in the works now. And we'll come to that as we go into the 80s. He recommends his friend John Williams to this guy who's been working on this side film. His friend has gone to Hawaii to avoid, similar to how it's like, oh God, Jaws is going to be not good. His friend goes to Hawaii to avoid it.
He's exiled to Hawaii.
Yeah. This is his friend George Lucas, who he had introduced John Williams to. And together in Hawaii, while they're waiting for Star Wars to do terrible, it ends up doing amazing, of course. George Lucas is like, hey, I have this idea, and it's called The Adventures of Indiana Smith. Is this something you'd be interested in? So now we move into the 80s, and they're collabing on Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Here we go.
It is not a adaptation, but what it is an homage to the serials of the golden age of Hollywood, these cliffhanger kind of
love letter
escapades.
It is just a hearkening back, baby. That's all it is. It's beautiful.
There is a spitball session that they recorded for 3 days where they go back and forth. They're like, we know what we want to do. Somebody has the audio recording and turned it into a transcript, so I'll post a link to that.
Oh, but it's I would love to read that.
It's just bizarre to see how, I mean, it's like some of it is offensive or off color or like, you know, it's kind of like the South Park writers' room where it's like clearly this wasn't supposed to be for anybody.
I mean, yeah.
But like, it is just wild to see like, oh, they're actively just like, we have this kind of vague idea. Let's come up with what is this thing.
This is 3 men in a room knowing millions of dollars are on the line, and they've all agreed to this illusion.
Yeah. And they blast it out. So now it ends up getting into production. Steven Spielberg is supposed to be shooting this Night Skies thing that he was coming up with after Raiders of the Lost Ark. And he had been doing tests of animatronics. There was a draft of a script. There's all these different aliens, and one of them befriends one of the sons. They're doing these animatronic tests. One alien has this long finger with an eerie light, but it just didn't work. So there's an amicable departure with this current writer. And like we said, Spielberg is working on Raiders. He's in Tunisia, killing Nazis, blowing up planes. And he's like, I've got to get back to the tranquility, the spirituality of Close Encounters. Like we said, like, what is my sequel that I'm supposed to be doing after this turning into? So he speaks to Melissa Matheson, who was dating and then married Harrison Ford. And she read this script and broke down at the part talking about this tender, caring alien. So she ends up becoming the writer for the script, now known as E.T.
That's incredible.
So that's what
I had no idea.
The Close Encounters 2 became. I just wanted to bring all of that up to kind of show how these things turn and move and flip around and get people added on to them.
They're I mean, this is sketching, you know, you try these ideas. That didn't work, but this didn't. We bring up Roger Rabbit again, tangentially, but I got to see a documentary about original concept art for that, and the guys that designed him. And it was amazing to see the different versions that they just threw at each other. And they're wildly different and they're bonkers and look nothing like Roger Rabbit as we know. But there are elements that work. And it's just that process. It's that messy process of just throwing something on the wall and seeing what's good about it, being able to no insecurities. Just throw it on the wall. What works, what doesn't work. It's that beautiful alchemy.
And also all the animatronic stuff that they had spent tons of money on testing. It's like, well, we could still use that. We're still doing a movie about an alien, it's not.
And they can do a whole shoot as just a test. And it, oh no, didn't work. I don't know we don't know what this idea is yet.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something to the creative process for that. So we see the logo for Amblin Entertainment is the bicycle going across the moon. But where does that, because we know that's Steven Spielberg, so that comes into the picture right now. 1981 is when he makes that production company with a couple people. One of them who they get into the mix is Kathleen Kennedy.
Here we go.
She started, her first film that she produced with them was E.T. So she's now the president of Lucasfilm.
Miss Star Wars,
right? Person.
She's in everything, man. You go back and look. Every once in a while, just a great movie from the 90s.
Mhm.
I'll watch it like I remember this
She
and
produced it.
roll, like The Sixth Sense,
Mhm.
credits roll, and produced by Kathleen Kennedy. What?
She's
She's
all in it.
everywhere. She's
Yeah.
everywhere. She's
So
all.
yeah. So E.T. comes out in 1982 based on an imaginary alien friend that Steven Spielberg had after his parents' divorce. So
Mm.
this is one of the first ones where he's really digging into his personal life subject matter, that he's a lot of the stuff that happens in the script he worked with Melissa on to become part of it.
So if we look at this, we've had this sophomore slump of him really trying to figure out, okay, what is it about what I've got to say that works? And he's finally realizing by ET that it's really coming down to what he knows about.
Mhm.
If he didn't have the fire burning from the trauma of his parents' divorce, I don't know if ET would be compelling.
Right.
And I don't know if he would get any of these next
Well, and they
movies
said
made.
he said it was the, like we see Jaws, massive epic thing, Raiders of the Lost Ark, massive epic thing. It's like he was alone filming in Tunisia. He had
Yeah.
time to think about, what do I want to do next? I don't want to do this again, you know?
Yeah.
So that's definitely a huge part of it. I thought what was cool with the actual production, like you're talking about the director being the emotional voice. So
Yes.
this was shot in chronological order, which is not done with
Wow.
films.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
locations, you shoot them, you have actors that can only be available at certain
The
times.
filmmaking process is like the most everything is about the dollar. So if this location is in the movie throughout the movie, but it's light on the back end, well, you better bet we're gonna shoot this out and then we're done with it. Everything is economical. They use
Yeah.
all the pieces all at once as much as possible, and they shift it out, and it's like a Rubik's cube, a 3-dimensional Rubik's cube that moves all the time, and it is to the dime.
So it's extremely pricey to just say, well, we're going to shoot the first scene and then the second scene, and then we'll drive way over here or fly people out here to shoot the fourth, like
Because this is in order.
no,
It's
but the
just not
reason,
how it's
yeah.
done. It's just not nobody. It's just never happens. It's not something. Never.
But
Never.
Spielberg did it for this because it's mostly a young cast, and he wanted the emotional through line to work for them as actors.
He
And the
had to
big
have a
thing,
pitch. There it is. He had to have a reason. That's the reason, and that's why they did it.
and he
And
said,
you had to have a real reason.
especially for the end, he was like, I really wanted them to say goodbye to ET at the end because this is the end. It's like your real emotions as a 9-year-old or whatever is gonna come in with
And
that.
the movie's over. All right, that's it. Go home forever. It's over.
Yeah,
No more.
remember that this is the last
Yeah.
day we're here. Yeah, so it really worked. And of course, because I'm in the adaptation hunt,
Sniffing him out.
even though this is based on his life and he came up with it and all that stuff, there are a lot of comparisons to Peter Pan. So you could say Elliot is one of the Lost Boys. E.T. is Peter Pan. He can't survive on Earth, similar to emotionally can't survive in the world, has to be in Neverland.
I can totally see
the
that.
scientists are the pirates. It all kind of fits into
Yeah.
that paradigm.
Hey, he just did a sci-fi Peter Pan.
Yeah. So speaking of sci-fi, this surpassed Star Wars as the highest grossing film of all time. So
this is one I have to double take too, where I'm like, wow, E.T. was it, baby. My mom
Yeah.
loves E.T.
Yeah.
She just melts over E.T. I swear.
It's beautiful. So he got it for Jaws, the highest grossing film, and then he got it again, beat out his friend George Lucas for E.T., and then he holds it for 11 years until another Spielberg film comes out.
All right.
So this is now between 1982 and 1985. He is starting, since he's got his own production company, he's starting to not necessarily be the director, but have his hand still in the movements of the film. So Poltergeist was written by Spielberg using elements of that Night Skies Close Encounters 2 stuff that he had done with, but he could not direct it because he was prepping E.T. And they said, you cannot work on this. You cannot work on two things.
Yeah. No. You're shooting it in order. It's an amazing amount of money. Do that.
Yeah.
No.
The Twilight Zone he directed at this time. And then The Goonies was a story that he had done, but was actually written by Chris Columbus, who later directed the Harry Potter first films.
Gosh.
So that's where
they are.
He had done some other stuff, but that's kind of his start is, you're going to write The Goonies for me.
Right.
because Spielberg actually had bought Chris Columbus's Gremlins script for Amblin a few years previous.
No way. That's amazing. That's I love this. I
Yeah, so
love this.
that's how he
I
gets
love
it.
that Chris Columbus is this close knit with him, which I didn't really have a concept of.
Yeah.
It seems so clear now.
Spielberg keeps everybody
Gremlins, of course.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also he directs the Temple of Doom, which is odd that he's doing a sequel, but it is kind of his property and his baby.
Right. And if, and like we said, with it being an homage, it being a major callback to these serialized TV,
That was their
sci-fi
intention from the
dramas,
beginning.
Westerns,
Yeah.
then that starts to fit the format there. So,
yeah.
okay.
No, that's a good observation. I hadn't thought of that. That makes sense. Yeah. But he changes now in the mid 80s, 85. He's switching away from these summer blockbusters. The next film that he directs is The Color Purple, which is an adaptation of Alice Walker's Pulitzer Prize winning novel from 1982.
Yeah.
It is a critical smash, 11 Academy Award nominations, which probably goes without saying because almost every one of these films he gets at least 3 or 4 Academy Award nominations for. And then I didn't know this historically, but so in 87, China opened up again to Western investment. So he shot the first American film in Shanghai since the 1930s.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea.
He brings it back. So the opening of the Chinese film market. Now you see Mark Wahlberg is in some random Chinese produced film. That was Steven Spielberg started that up again in 87. Wow. The film was an adaptation again of a book by J.G. Ballard. It's called Empire of the Sun, and got 6 Academy Awards. Historical piece. Christian Bale, exactly. It was his first role.
As a child actor, Christian Bale.
Found Christian Bale at the age of 13.
I forget about that.
So many things we forget about.
That's entire Christian Bale's whole career is probably because of Steven Spielberg.
In China. Yeah.
Found Batman.
Speaking of Batman, so Steven Spielberg goes back to blockbusters. So The Last Crusade, the Indiana Jones business, was the highest grossing film of 89. It beat out Batman in the worldwide box office, which everybody was surprised by because Batman seemed like a sure bet for that year. And then that same year did his first romantic film called Always, which was a remake of another film. Not an adaptation, but a remake.
Yes. I smile when I think of this one because nobody remembers this one.
Right. It was odd. It got very mixed reviews.
Here we are, Always.
Yeah. The cover looks like a romantic, sappy film, and it is. So people didn't really like that. Now, as we move into the 90s, he is producing Warner Brothers cartoon hits, Tiny Toons, Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain. He's still got his producerial fingers in the pies.
He just produced the Roger Rabbit. Again, we'll mention for the 3rd time. This is just right in this time.
And so which
we did a whole episode on, and you should go listen to.
It's amazing. But he's mixing it up still with the adaptation. So in 1991... he does a sequel to Peter Pan and Wendy called Hook.
I had no idea that this was not critically received well, that this was kind of panned. My whole childhood, I grew up thinking it's just another Steven Spielberg smash.
Now it is, but at the time.
Now it is. I think it's come around. As now that we're all adults, we're all looking at each other. No, right? It was amazing. Yes, it was.
Yeah.
He's in the midst of his career. He's won Oscars and Oscars. He is changing Hollywood, and he's still trying to figure out. Still trying to figure out what makes it tick. But right in the middle of that, he's not just making something about nothing that he doesn't know about. Like you think he's not thinking about Peter Pan. And this version of Peter Pan, who has grown up and forgotten who he is and has lost touch with himself. Right. Are you saying he just it was just a cash in? He just did that for the money. He certainly didn't give that any intimate thought.
Everything he cares about. So it's crazy how much he thinks about it. So speaking to that, one of the things that he really wanted to do, and this is almost 10 years in the making, because he had said, I wasn't mature enough to figure out a way to do this. He wanted to film Schindler's List after Hook. He wanted that to be his next film. The president of Universal gave him the green light, said, we'll help you with this. Because on the surface, nobody has really tackled this subject matter in this way.
Yeah.
It's something that's going to be big. but he said, we'll give you the green light, but you have to do this film that we already bought the rights to first that we want you to do. And it's called Jurassic Park. And so that is where we are going to end this part 1, leaving you on the cliffhanger.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you so much. We'll pick it up with Jurassic Park next week. Yeah, still covering with Spielberg. So I know that we had some Spotify rap, some shout outs there. So thank you guys. If we were in your top, we saw a couple of those. We're going to get to Ready Player One next week. So,
right.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. That we'd love to see that kind of stuff. I was really amazed at some of it. So thank you guys. What are you excited about? You never know if we're going to do an episode on it. So you might as well get it on our radar. Send us a message.
@ILLITERATEPod on Instagram. And we will finish the tale of Steven Spielberg next week.
Thank you guys.